Selections from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Part 26. The Vedanta. Delivered at Lahore on the 12th November 1897. Section 2. The next unity is the omnipresent impersonal being known by its old mythological name as Brahma, the four-headed Brahma, and psychologically called Mahat. This is where the two unite. What is called your mind is only a bit of this Mahat caught in the trap of the brain, and the sum total of all minds caught in the meshes of brains is what you call Samashti, the aggregate, the universal. Analysis had to go further. It was not yet complete. Here we were, each one of us, as it were, a microcosm, and the world taken altogether is a macrocosm. But whatever is in this Vyasti, the particular, we may safely conjecture that a similar thing is happening also outside. If we had the power to analyze our own minds, we might safely conjecture that the same thing is happening in the cosmic mind. What is this mind is the question. In modern times, in Western countries, as physical science is making rapid progress, as physiology is step by step conquering stronghold after stronghold of old religions, the Western people do not know where to stand because, to their great despair, modern physiology at every step has identified the mind with the brain. But we in India have known that always. That is the first proposition the Hindu boy learns, that the mind is matter, only finer. The body is gross, and behind the body is what we call the Sukshma Sharira, the fine body or mind. This is also material, only finer, and it is not the Atman. I will not translate this word to you in English because the idea does not exist in Europe. It is untranslatable. The modern attempt of German philosophers is to translate the word Atman by the word self, and until that word is universally accepted, it is impossible to use it. So call it as self or anything, it is our Atman. This Atman is the real man behind. It is the Atman that uses the material mind as its instrument. It is Antakarana, as is the psychological term for the mind. And the mind, by means of a series of internal organs, works the visible organs of the body. What is this mind? It was only the other day that Western philosophers have come to know that the eyes are not the real organs of vision, but that behind these are other organs, the Indriyas. And if these are destroyed, a man may have 1,000 eyes like Indra, but there will be no sight for him. Aye, your philosophy starts with this assumption that by vision is not meant the external vision. The real vision belongs to the internal organs, the brain centers inside. You may call them what you like, but it is not that the Indriyas or the eyes or the nose or the ears. And the sum total of all these Indriyas plus the Manas, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara, etc. is what is called the mind. And if the modern physiologist comes to tell you that the brain is what is called the mind, and that the brain is formed of so many organs, you need not be afraid at all. Tell him that your philosophers knew it always. It is one of the very first principles of your religion. Well, then we have to understand now what is meant by this Manas, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara, etc. First of all, let us take Chitta. It is the mind stuff, a part of the Mahat. It is a generic name for the mind itself, including all its various states. Suppose on a summer evening there is a lake, smooth and calm, without a ripple on its surface. And suppose someone throws a stone into this lake. What happens? First, there is the action, the blow given to the river. Next, the water rises and sends a reaction towards the stone. And that reaction takes the form of a wave. First, the water vibrates a little and immediately sends back a reaction in the form of a wave. The chitta, let us compare to this lake, and the external objects are like the stones thrown into it. As soon as it comes in contact with any external object by means of the Indriyas must be there to carry these external objects inside. There is a vibration, what is called the Manas, indecisive. Next, there is a reaction, the determinative faculty, Buddhi, and along with this Buddhi flashes the idea of Aham and the external object. Suppose there is a mosquito sitting upon my hand. This sensation is carried to my chitta and it vibrates a little. This is the psychological manas. Then there is a reaction, and immediately comes the idea that I have a mosquito on my hand and that I shall have to drive it off. Thus, these stones are thrown into the lake, but in the case of the lake, every blow that comes into its form from the external world, while in the case of the lake of the mind, the blows may either come from the external world or the internal world. This whole series is what is called the Antakarana. Along with it, you ought to understand one thing more that will help us in understanding the Advaita system later on. It is this: all of you must have seen pearls, and most of you know how pearls are formed. A grain of sand enters into the shell of a pearl oyster and sets up an irritation there, and the oyster's body reacts towards the irritation and covers the little particle with its own juice. That crystallizes and forms the pearl. So the whole universe is like that. It is a pearl which is being formed by us. What we get from the external world is simply the blow. Even to the conscious of that blow, we have to react, and as soon as we react, we really project a portion of our own mind towards the blow, and when we come to know of it, it is really our own mind as it had been shaped by the blow. Therefore, it is clear even to those who want to believe in a hard and fast realism of an external world, which they cannot but admit in these days of physiology, that supposing we represent the external world by X, what we really know is X plus mind, and this mind element is so great that it has covered the whole of that X, which has remained unknown and unknowable throughout, and therefore, if there is an external world, it is always unknown and unknowable. What we know of it as it is molded, formed, fashioned by our own mind. So with the internal world, the same applies to our own soul, the Atman. In order to know the Atman, we shall have to know it through the mind, and therefore what little we know of this Atman is simply the Atman plus the mind. That is to say, the Atman covered over, fashioned and molded by the mind, and nothing more. We shall return this to it later, but we will remember what has been told here. The next thing to understand is this. The question arose that this body is the name of one continuous stream of matter. Every moment we are adding material to it, and every moment material is being thrown off by it. Like a river continually flowing, vast masses of water always changing places, yet all the same. We take up the whole thing in imagination and call it the same river. What do we call the river? Every moment the water is changing, the shore is changing. Every moment the environment is changing. What is the river then? It is the name of this series of changes. So with the mind. That is the great Kshanika Vijnana Vada doctrine, most difficult to understand, but most rigorously and logically worked out in the Buddhistic philosophy, and this arose in India in opposition to some part of the Vedanta. That had to be answered, and we shall see how later on. It could only be answered by Advaitism and by nothing else. We will see also how, in spite of people's curious notions about Advaitism, people's fright about Advaitism, it is a salvation of the world, because therein alone is to be found the reason of things. Dualism and other isms are very good as means of worship, very satisfying to the mind, and maybe they have helped the mind onward, but if man wants to be rational and religious at the same time, Advaita is the one system in the world for him. Well, now we shall regard the mind as a similar river continually filling itself at one end and emptying itself at the other end. Where is that unity which we call the Atman? The idea is this, that in spite of this continuous change in the body and in spite of this continuous change in the mind, there is in us something that is unchangeable, which makes our ideas of things appear unchangeable. When rays of light coming from different quarters fall upon a screen or a wall or upon something that is not changeable, then and then alone it is possible for them to form a unity. Then and then alone it is possible for them to form one complete whole. Where is this unity in the human organs, falling upon which, as it were, the various ideas will come to unity and become one complete whole? This certainly cannot be the mind itself. seeing that it also changes. Therefore, there must be something which is neither the body nor the mind, something which changes not, something permanent upon which all our ideas, our sensations fall to form a unity and a complete whole, and this is the real soul, the Atman of man. And seeing that everything material, whether you call it fine matter or mind, must be changeful, seeing that what you call gross matter, the external world, must also be changeful in comparison to that. This unchangeable something cannot be of material substance, therefore, it is spiritual. That is to say, it is not matter. It is indestructible, unchangeable. Next will come another question. Apart from those old arguments which only rise in the external world, the arguments in support of design, who created this external world, who created matter, etc. The idea here is to know truth only from the inner nature of man, and the question arises just in the same way as it arose about the soul. Taking for granted that there is a soul unchangeable in each man, which is neither the mind nor the body, there is still a unity of idea among the souls, a unity of feeling, of sympathy. How is it possible that my soul can act upon your soul? Where is the medium through which it can work? Where is the medium through which it can act? How is it I can feel anything about your soul? What is it that is in touch both with your soul and with my soul? Therefore, there is a metaphysical necessity of admitting another soul, for it must be a soul which acts in contact with all the different souls and in and through matter. One soul which covers and interpenetrates all the infinite number of souls in the world, in and through which they live, in and through which they sympathize and love and work for one another. And this universal soul is Paramatman, the Lord God of the universe. Again, it follows that because the soul is not made of matter, since it is spiritual, it cannot obey the laws of matter. It cannot be judged by the laws of matter. It is therefore unconquerable, birthless, deathless, and changeless. Nainam chindanti shastrani nainam dahati pavakaha na chainam kledayantyapo na shoshayati marutaha. Nityaha sarvagataha stanuhu achalo ayam sanatanaha. This self weapons cannot pierce, not fire can burn, water cannot wet, nor air can dry up. Changeless, all-pervading, unmoving, immovable, eternal is this self of man. We learn according to the Gita and the Vedanta that this individual self is also Vibhu, and according to Kapila is omnipresent. Of course, there are sects in India which hold that the self is Anu, infinitely small, but what they mean is Anu in manifestation. Its real nature is Vibhu, all-pervading. There comes another idea, startling perhaps, yet a characteristically Indian idea, and if there is any idea that is common to all our sects, it is this. Therefore, I beg you to pay attention to this one idea and to remember it, for this is the very foundation of everything that we have in India. The idea is this. You have heard of the doctrine of physical evolution preached in the Western world by the German and the English savants. It tells us that the bodies of the different animals are really one. The differences that we see are but different expressions of the same series, that from the lowest worm to the highest and the most saintly man, it is but one, the one changing into the other and so on, going up and up, higher and higher, until it attains perfection. We had that idea also, declares our yogi Patanjali. Jatyantara parinamaha prakritya purat. One species, the jati is species, changes into another species, evolution. Parinama means one thing changing into another, just as one species changes into another. Where do we differ from the Europeans? Patanjali says, Prakritya Purat, by the infilling of the nature. The European says it is competition, natural and sexual selection, etc. that forces one body to take the form of another. But here is another idea, a still better analysis going deeper into the thing and saying by the infilling of nature. What is meant by this infilling of nature? We admit that the amoeba goes higher and higher until it becomes a Buddha. We admit that, but we are at the same time as much certain that you cannot get an amount of work out of a machine unless you have put it in some shape or other. The sum total of the energy remains the same, whatever the forms it may take. If you want a mass of energy at one end, you have got to put it in at the other end. It may be in the form another, but the amount of energy that should be produced out of it must be the same. Therefore, if a Buddha is the one end of the change, the very amoeba must have been the Buddha also. If the Buddha is the evolved amoeba, the amoeba was the involved Buddha also. If this universe is a manifestation of an almost infinite amount of energy, when this universe was in a state of pralaya, it must have represented the same amount of involved energy. It cannot have been otherwise. As such, it follows that every soul is infinite. From the lowest worm that crawls under our feet to the noblest and greatest saints, all have this infinite power, infinite purity, and infinite everything. Only the difference is in the degree of manifestation. The worm is only manifesting just a little bit of that energy. You have manifested more. Another God man has manifested still more. That is all the difference. But that infinite power is there all the same, says Patanjali. Tataha kshetrikavat, like the peasant irrigating his field. Through a little corner of his field, he brings water from a reservoir somewhere, and perhaps he has got a little lock that prevents the water from rushing into his field. When he wants water, he has simply to open the lock, and in rushes the water of its own power. The power has not to be added, it is already there in the reservoir. So, every one of us, every being has as his own background such a reservoir of strength, infinite power, infinite purity, infinite bliss, and existence infinite. Only these locks, these bodies, are hindering us from expressing what we really are to the fullest.